"You better be ready," my father shouted across the dinner table, his voice thick with pride and cruelty. "Because your time in that house is running out, it belongs to your brother now." The words clattered louder than the cutlery, louder than the ticking clock above the mantel. My brother smoked into his glass, my mother's laughter rang thin and sharp, and suddenly the room smelled of roasted meat and betrayal. Everyone, my name is Evelyn Cross. People say my name like it's fragile, like it belongs on church rosters or wedding invitations, not whispered in a house where love used to live. But I carry it differently, like a blade folded inside silk. I didn't argue that night. Not when my father's spit flew with each word. Not when my brother grinned like a thief handed the keys to a kingdom he never built. I sat still, lips sealed, because silence is the kind of answer that burns longer than fury. I stared at the table. The light flickered against crystal glasses, reflections twisting like ghosts. My palms pressed flat against my knees, nails digging crescents into my skin. Every nerve screamed to shout, to claw back what was mine, but instead I breathed, slow and steady. I let them think they had won. The betrayal wasn't sudden. No, it had been carved slowly, like initials into wood, favoritism in small glances, inheritance whispered in corners, promises rewritten behind closed doors. Tonight was simply the unveiling, the moment they stopped pretending I was family at all. When dinner ended, the house echoed with their laughter, hollow as church bells after a funeral. I lingered behind, touching the corners of furniture like farewells, the dent in the stair banister where I'd slipped as a child, the burn mark on the counter from my first attempt at cooking, the soft indent in the couch where I once cried into my mother's lap. Each touch was a silent goodbye, but also a seed. Because I wasn't leaving broken. I was leaving prepared. I slid the spare key from its hiding place in the potted fern by the window. It was cold, heavy, and real in my palm, proof that every door still opened for me. I slipped it into my pocket. My father's voice still rang in my head. "Your time in that house is running out." No, I thought. My time in this house is only beginning. And when they walked back through that door 48 hours later, they would wish they had never stepped inside. The house was quiet after they left, but not peaceful, quiet like a theater before the curtain rises. Every corner held its breath. I walked through each room with deliberate slowness, memoizing, rearranging, preparing. I wasn't here to cling. I was here to reclaim. The first thing I did was open the drawers in my father's study. His handwriting sprawled across contracts and deeds, all neat lines of ownership and power. He thought those pages were untouchable, locked by his authority. But I'd grown up watching his hand sign every check, every mortgage. I knew where his weak ink bled, where the signatures faltered. I slid a few papers into a folder, not to steal, but to remind him that the empire he built wasn't invisible to me. Then I moved to the kitchen. My mother's recipe book sat there, stained with years of sauce and grief. I slipped in a note between the pages, not a threat, not yet, just a reminder written in my sharpest hand: a house remembers who it belongs to. Upstairs, I opened my brother's old desk. Inside, tucked behind comic books and forgotten photos, was a receipt, one that proved he had taken money not his. Money that was mine. I didn't need to scream it at dinner, the proof in my hand was louder than any voice. I left subtle signs behind, things they wouldn't notice immediately but that would haunt them once they did. The photo on the mantel turned just slightly to the left, the coat in the closet hung inside out, the spare glass in the cabinet missing. Not vandalism, precision. Each move a whisper: I am still here. By the time I lay in my old bed, moonlight spilling through blinds, the house felt alive again. Not as theirs. Not even as mine. As something waiting. I closed my eyes with the key under my pillow and the plan forming sharp in my mind. Revenge, I realized, wasn't rage. It was patience wearing a beautiful mask. And when the clock struck 48 hours, that mask would slip. The knock came like thunder wrapped in wood. Sharp, confident, familiar. I didn't move right away. I stood in the hallway, my hand hovering over the doorknob, my breath calm, almost detached. Through the peephole, I saw them. My father, chest proud as always, my mother clutching her purse like a prize, my brother grinning, already rehearsing his victory walk. They looked like royalty returning to a stolen castle. I opened the door slowly, chain still hooked. Their eyes swept past me as if I were an afterthought. My father stepped forward, voice booming, "Well, you're still here. But not for long." He tried to push, but the chain held. I smiled, a thin, deliberate smile, and let the silence stretch. When I finally unhooked the chain, I stepped aside without a word, letting them enter like guests, not owners. The air shifted as soon as they crossed the threshold. They didn't notice it, not yet. But the house did. My brother tossed his keys on the table, my father hung his coat like a man claiming territory, my mother drifted to the mantel where the photos waited. That's when the first crack appeared. My father reached for the box I'd placed neatly on the table. A plain box, unremarkable to the untrained eye. He frowned, curiosity sharpening his face. When he lifted the lid, the silence was no longer neutral. Inside lay his old watch, a faded photograph, and the folder of documents, arranged carefully, deliberately, like evidence waiting for a jury. His hand froze mid-air. My mother's breath caught. My brother leaned closer, his smirk thinning when he spotted the receipt tucked neatly on top. For a moment, the room pulsed with something unspoken, a ripple of unease they tried to mask. I said nothing. I only watched. Their eyes darted from object to object, piecing together what each meant. They didn't realize it yet, but the house was no longer theirs to command. It was mine to haunt. And haunting, I discovered, was not about noise. It was about silence that forced people to hear themselves. The first seeds of their regret had just been planted. My father's jaw tightened as he sifted through the papers, each page a mirror of his own carelessness. He slammed the lid shut, trying to mask the flicker of doubt in his eyes. This is nothing," he barked, but his voice lacked its usual steel. My brother laughed too loudly, like a man whistling past a graveyard. "She's just being dramatic, Dad. Always has been." But his fingers toyed with that receipt, the one proving his theft. His smile trembled at the edges. I leaned against the doorway, calm as water, letting their unease bloom in the silence. "Strange, isn't it?" I finally murmured, "how houses hold memories better than people do." My mother turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. She wanted to speak, but the note I'd slipped into her recipe book must have found her first. Her hand still clutched at her purse as though the words were burning through the leather. She shifted uncomfortably, whispering, "What did you do, Evelyn?" I didn't answer. Instead, I moved slowly, deliberately, through the kitchen, running my hand over the counters, the cabinets, the stove. My every touch unsettled them. My every pause reminded them that I knew the house in ways they never would. Then I set the key, their spare key, the one from the fern pot, down on the table. It clicked against the wood, a sound sharp enough to cut the room in half. "Funny," I said softly, "how a key can tell you who really belongs." My father's face flushed red, but he didn't pick it up. My brother shoved his hands in his pockets, shoulders tight. My mother whispered my name again, but this time it wasn't a question. It was a plea. The air grew heavy, thick with things unsaid. They'd come home to claim victory, but the house had greeted them with doubt. They looked like intruders now, standing in a place that no longer bent to them. I watched, silent, patient. Their discomfort was only the first step. The real unraveling hadn't even begun. And I promised myself, I would not rush it. The longer they stayed, the louder the silence grew. It clung to the walls, filled the air vents, pressed against the windows. My father paced the living room, his shoes striking the floorboards like gavel blows, but each step sounded hollow, like authority without power. My brother tried to busy himself, opening cupboards, pulling drawers, as though searching for proof that he still owned something here. That's when he froze. The graduation photo, mine, lay beneath the bed in the guest room, exactly where I had left it. He dragged it out, dust coating the frame, and stared at my face in the picture. His voice cracked just slightly as he called out, "Why is this still here?" I walked in, calm, folding my arms. "Because this house remembers," I said. "It remembers what was earned, and what was stolen." He tried to laugh, but it came out jagged. My father barked at him to stop wasting time, to help clear out the last of her things. But as they searched, every room betrayed them. A book turned the wrong way. A coat hung inside out. A glass missing. Small, deliberate wrongs that whispered, "You don't belong here." My mother was the first to crack. She stood in the hallway, clutching the letter I'd slipped into the drawer. Her lips trembled as she read the words that reminded her of every promise broken, every secret kept, every time she'd chosen silence over me. Tears slid down her cheek, not from my cruelty but from the truth finally speaking louder than her excuses. She whispered, almost to herself, "We should have never done this." My father snapped, furious, but his voice wavered. My brother shoved the receipt into his pocket, but the guilt had already stained his eyes. They were unraveling, thread by thread, and all I had done was hand them the scissors. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lift a hand. I just stood still, letting the house echo with the weight of everything they had tried to bury. And for the first time, I saw fear flicker across my father's face. My father tried to smother the fear with fury. His fists clenched, his voice booming. "Enough of this. She's just playing games, childish games." But the way he avoided my eyes betrayed him. He was shouting at the walls now, as if the plaster might believe him. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The house answered for me. A draft slipped down the hallway, rustling the curtains though no window was open. The sound of the speaker in the corner, forgotten, low, began to hum one of those songs I'd chosen. Not loud. Just enough. A haunting thread of melody. My brother cursed under his breath. He turned the frame of my graduation photo face down, as though that would silence it. His hands shook. That receipt in his pocket felt heavier with every step he took. The guilt had begun to suffocate him, and guilt always speaks louder in quiet rooms. My mother sank into the old armchair, her purse on her lap, her face pale. The letter still trembled in her hand. She whispered my name again, softer now, broken. "Evelyn, what do you want?" I stepped forward slowly, deliberately, every move a message. "What I want," I said, "is simple. The truth you buried. The respect you denied. And the peace you thought I'd never claim." My voice wasn't raised, but it carried, slicing through the air sharper than any scream. My father slammed his fist on the table, rattling the box I'd left there. "This house is mine," he roared. But the watch inside the box glinted in the dim light, catching his eye like an accusation. He flinched, so slight, so uncharacteristic, that my brother noticed. Silence again. Heavy. Absolute. Then my brother muttered, "Maybe she's right." His words cracked the room like lightning. My father spun on him, eyes blazing, but the seed was planted. Doubt spread fast, jagged and unstoppable. I stayed quiet, calm, watching them fracture. My revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about exposure. And piece by piece, the masks they wore were splintering. The house didn't need me to scream. It only needed me to stay. The silence after my brother's words was the kind that eats the air out of a room. My father's face turned crimson, veins sharp against his temples. "Don't you dare take her side," he growled, but there was no thunder behind it now, only desperation dressed as rage. My brother shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking toward me, then the box, then the receipt burning in his pocket. He muttered, almost to himself, "She's not wrong. I did what I had to." His voice cracked under the weight of his own confession. My mother clutched her purse tighter, tears staining her cheeks. She whispered, "Stop this, both of you, please." But her plea wasn't for me. It was for them, the men who had finally been forced to see the mirror I'd built for them. I stepped into the center of the room, calm, steady. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was slow, deliberate, like a drumbeat I controlled. "You told me I had 48 hours, I said softly, my gaze moving between the three of them. "And I used every second. Not to pack. Not to leave. But to remind this house who it belongs to." The words hung there, sharp and unshakable. My father tried to laugh, harsh, hollow, but it broke off in his throat. The house seemed to conspire against him. The floor creaked under his weight, the draft hummed through the vents, the faint song from the speaker pulsed like a heartbeat. Every sound pressed him down, reminded him that ownership on paper is nothing compared to belonging in blood and memory. Finally, he slammed the lid of the box shut again, but his hands trembled. "You think you've won?" His voice cracked. This doesn't change anything." I tilted my head, my voice even. "It changes everything. Because now, you'll never walk into this house without remembering what you tried to erase. Every room will remind you. Every object. Every silence. They stared at me, each trapped in their own unraveling. My father in anger. My brother in guilt. My mother in regret. And me, finally, in control. The storm had peaked. All that remained was the ending. The air in the room felt thick, almost electric. My father's voice had shrunk to a rasp, my brother couldn't meet my eyes, and my mother sat hunched, letter still trembling in her hand. They had come to claim victory, but instead they were drowning in the weight of their own sins. I didn't shout. I didn't strike. I didn't need to. I walked to the window, pulled the curtains wide, and let the evening light flood in. Dust swirled in the golden air, catching on the old furniture, the photographs, the places they had tried to erase me from. The house looked alive again, breathing me into every corner. Turning back, I spoke clearly, every syllable deliberate. You wanted me gone. You thought silence would bury me. But you forgot one thing. This house does not belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to the one who carries it. My father's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time in my life, he had nothing to say. My brother pulled the receipt from his pocket, staring at it like it was a noose. He dropped it on the table, unable to hold it anymore. My mother, still weeping, folded the letter carefully and placed it back in her purse as though it were scripture. And me? I set the spare key back on the table, but not for them. For myself. A reminder that no matter what papers they signed, no matter what words they shouted, the truth had already rooted itself here. I picked up my bag, walked to the door, and paused with my hand on the knob. My voice was calm, steady, almost tender. This house is mine. Not because you say it isn't. But because every corner remembers me, and it will never forget you tried to erase me. I left them sitting there, each one broken in a different way, each one haunted not by me, but by themselves. And as the door clicked shut behind me, the silence inside was louder than any scream.